"We pray for recovery," my mother told 80 people. She'd been telling them I was an addict for 5 years. A man in the second pew turned his head. He'd held my hand through surgery at TA military hospital. He was her parish priest. He'd been listening for 18 months. "I'm 37 years old. I'm a captain in the United States Army, aviation branch, and I have served for 13 years. And on a cold Sunday in late October, in a church fellowship hall in Central Virginia, my mother stood at a microphone in front of 80 people and told them I was lost. She wasn't wrong about that part. I had been lost, just not in the way she described. I need to take you back. Not to the church. Not yet. First, I need to take you to the place where all of this started, where the woman my mother invented, and the woman I actually am split apart and never came back. Back together, Paktia Province, Eastern Afghanistan, October 14, 2018. The vibration came first. It always did. Before every lift, before the skids left the ground, the rotor wash traveled through the flight deck and up through my boots and into my spine like a second pulse. That vibration was how I knew I was about to do it. To do my real work, not consulting, not logistics, not maintenance contracts for private firms. My real work, the kind you don't talk about at Sunday dinner, the kind that doesn't fit on a church bulletin. I was aircraft commander on a personnel recovery tasking. Call sign Sabre 7 Actual. The actual suffix meant I was the one at the controls. I was the one responsible. 4 passengers in back, my crew chief, and specialist Danny Teague on the door gun. Danny was 21. He had a gap between his front teeth and a habit of humming country songs during pre-flight checks that drove the crew chief insane. We were 40 minutes into the flight when the RPG hit the tail rotor assembly. There's a specific thing that happens when a Black Hawk loses tail rotor authority. The aircraft doesn't fall. It starts to spin. The nose wants to yaw violently to the right, and the instinct of every untrained person on the planet is to fight it. You don't fight it. You enter auto rotation within 2 seconds, or you die. You manage the energy in the rotor disc. You find the ground. You put the aircraft down somewhere that isn't going to kill everyone inside it. I found a dry riverbed. 0 obstacle clearance. Confined area approach protocol executed clean. We hit hard. The cyclic controls stick. That's the flight stick between your knees. Slammed forward on impact and my harness caught the load across my left side. I heard the collarbone go. 3 ribs followed. A bone fragment from the collarbone shifted and pressed against my left lung. I felt it like a nail being driven in sideways. All 4 passengers survived. Danny Teague did not. He was alive when we hit the riverbed. He was alive when I unstrapped and rolled out of the cockpit with my left arm hanging wrong, and my chest making a sound it should not have been making. He was alive when I directed the crew into a defensive perimeter, with a sidearm in my right hand, and 90 minutes of open ground between us and the QRF. He was alive for most of that. His last words were, "Tell my mom it wasn't scary." I wrote the letter to Patricia Teague in Waycross, Georgia, on a piece of cardboard I cut from an MRE box because my right hand was managing most of the work, and my left shoulder was still compromised. The handwriting was unsteady. The letters were larger than my normal hand. Slightly irregular, as if I was pressing hard to make sure the ink took. I have kept a carbon copy of that letter in a Ziploc bag in my glove compartment for 6 years. I was evacuated to Bagram's Roll 2 medical facility. They put me flat on my back under fluorescent light. The light had a specific quality. Greenish. Institutional. The kind that turned skin the color of paper. I was conscious. I was polite. I asked the chaplain on call to read Psalm 23. He held my right hand because my left was being assessed for surgery. When he finished reading, I quoted the last verse back to him from memory. Not his translation, but the one my grandmother had taught me in Georgia. The old translation. He asked me where I'd learned it. I said, my grandmother in Georgia. That was all. I didn't give him my rank. I didn't say my name was on the manifest. I called myself the pilot. He told me his name. I don't remember it from that night. I would learn it again, 6 years later, in a very different room. Within 72 hours, I was at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, surgical repair of the collarbone. 3 fractured ribs healing on their own timeline. A bone fragment removed from proximity to my left lung. I spent weeks in that building, learning how to lift my arm above my shoulder again. That is where Constance Prescott, my mother, began building her story. Not when I came home. Not when I could defend myself. while I was flat on my back in a military hospital with a drainage tube and a physical therapy schedule and no access to a personal phone during recovery hours. That is when she walked into the fellowship hall of our family's parish church and told them her daughter had been administratively discharged from the military for substance abuse. She told them I was homeless. She told them she prayed for me every Sunday. The we in her prayers was performing grief. It was not grief. It was architecture. My mother had not just forgotten me. She had replaced me with a version that was easier to explain. A woman who served, who was absent from holidays, who couldn't describe her work, who came home with scars she covered and a silence she couldn't break. That woman was an embarrassment Constance could not metabolize. She needed a story that explained the empty chair at Christmas. A story that made people reach for her hand after the service and say, "You're so strong, Constance." A story that put her at the center. A drug-addicted daughter gave her that. She told it so many times she half convinced herself. The photographs went into a box. My flight school graduation photograph. My first deployment photograph. The framed Air Medal citation. A photo of me standing in front of a Black Hawk with my crew. All of us squinting in Afghan sun. Constance packed them into a plastic storage bin and put them in the attic under a box of Christmas Day. The living room shelf, the one visible from the front door, kept the school pictures. One vacation photo from when I was 12. A youth choir performance. Nothing after 18. The shelf told a story. Joanna Prescott existed as a child. Then she stopped. I have not been inside that attic in 4 years. I have never asked for those photographs back. I am not sure why. I think it might be because asking would confirm that she had taken them. My father died while I was at Walter Reed. Constance did not call until after the burial. I learned about it from a nurse who noticed the change in my vitals when I checked my email. She asked if I needed a chaplain. I said no. I had already had one. When I came home, limited duty, still rebuilding, still learning what my left shoulder could and could not do. The narrative was already load-bearing. 5 years. That is how long it took to become permanent infrastructure. Sunday after Sunday. Handshake after handshake. We don't really talk about what she does. We haven't for a long time. Some children take a path you can't follow. Denial, I would learn, was her specialty. I missed Hannah's first day of 2nd grade, September 2021. I was at Fort Belvoir, completing a limited-duty administrative assignment, 1 hour and 20 minutes from her school. I did not attend because the unit was running a command readiness review, and I was not yet cleared to explain my absence without disclosing my assignment status. My neighbor, Carol Simmons, sent me a 7-second video. Hannah, in a pink backpack, standing at the school entrance door. Her head turns twice toward the parking lot. She is looking for me. She does not find me. She goes in. I have watched that video 41 times. I do not say this to anyone. My left shoulder aches in cold weather. It is a dull structural pain. The kind that reads as nothing to anyone watching, but speaks to me constantly. I have never filed a disability claim. I am not sure why. I think it might be because filing would make permanent a version of myself. I have not fully accepted. The version that was broken in a riverbed and never quite set right. Hannah once told a teacher that her mother travels for work, like an astronaut, she can't always call. That sentence is the one I cannot think about for too long. If you've ever been written off by someone who didn't know the first thing about your real life, hit that like button. Subscribe. You're not done here. The petition arrived 3 days before the christening parental fitness review, filed in the county family court by Constance Ruth Prescott, my mother, against me. The petition stated that I was an unfit parent, that I was unstable, that I was unable to provide a safe and consistent home for my 8-year-old daughter. It was supported by 2 fabricated witness statements. Rebecca Walsh, age 59, church member, Carol Hammond, age 62, Constance's closest friend in the congregation. Both women signed affidavits claiming they had personally witnessed me intoxicated at a family gathering approximately 2 years prior. 2 years prior, I was on post at Fort Belvoir. I was not at any family gathering. I have the duty log. I have the post-access records. I was nowhere near that event because there was no event to be near. I read the petition in the parking lot of a CVS at 7 in the evening. I did not move for 4 minutes. Not because I was afraid. Because I was calculating how many ways my mother had found to use my silence against me, and how precisely she had done it. She had weaponized the one thing I could not break, my cover, my orders, my inability to say where I was, what I did, why I was gone. Every classified briefing, every restricted flight corridor, every deployment I could not name, she had rewritten each absence into evidence of failure. She was not stupid. She was thorough. Hannah could be removed from my custody pending investigation. That was the language. Pending investigation. My daughter, my 8-year-old daughter who plays recreational soccer and whose favorite thing in the world is watching me make pancakes on Saturday mornings. I folded the petition. I put it in my bag. I drove home. I made Hannah dinner. I read her a chapter of her book. I checked the locks. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, and I did not sleep. 3 days later, I walked into a church. Late October in Central Virginia, cold, dry air, slate-colored sky, the kind of pre-winter flatness that makes everything look like a photograph of itself. The oaks outside the parish had gone amber and rust. The parking lot was full. Inside, the air was warm in a way that felt pressurized. All that heated air against cold stone walls. Chrysanthemums on the altar in yellow and white. Candles above the baptismal font throwing amber light. I sat in the back pew. I had been there for 17 minutes. The christening was for a family friend's infant. Constance was a featured elder. She had organized the reception. Chicken salad sandwiches on white bread, quartered and arranged in concentric circles, layered jello mold in green and red. The same recipe she'd brought to every church event for 20 years. Sweet tea and a glass pitcher. A sheet cake from the Kroger bakery with "Blessed are the children," piped in blue icing. My paper plate sat untouched beside my folded napkin. The fellowship hall was full. 80 people. Folding chairs. Paper napkins. The low murmur of a congregation at ease with itself. Constance moved through the room like she was conducting it. A touch on the elbow here. A laugh there. Every guest rotating around her orbit. Then she was at the microphone. She had been asked to say a few words about the blessings of family. She smiled. She held a handkerchief in her left hand, a prop she did not use. She spoke about gratitude, about the gift of children, about the church as a second family, for those whose own families carry burdens. Then she said my name. Some of us have heavy burdens at home that we carry in prayer. Her voice softened. Practiced. My daughter has struggled. We don't always know where she is. We pray for recovery. 80 people nodded. Even the candle flame above the baptismal font seemed to hesitate, as if the room itself needed a second before it could carry that weight. It wasn't grief. It wasn't worry. It was architecture. A story built over 5 years. One Sunday at a time, in a building where everyone already trusted her. And then a man in the second pew turned his head. He looked past the folding chairs and the sheet cake and the sweet tea and the 80 nodding faces. He looked at the back of the fellowship hall. He looked at me. I was standing in the doorway with my coat still on. Constance followed his gaze. The room followed hers. And when my mother's eyes found mine, her expression did not shift to shame. It did not shift to surprise. It shifted to calculation. She was assessing whether the narrative survived the room. I saw it. That micro-adjustment, that clinical recalibration behind her eyes. That was not a mother seeing her daughter. That was an architect checking load-bearing walls. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, seated in those folding chairs with their sheet cake and their sweet tea, was that the man in the second pew had held my hand through something I had never described to anyone in that room. Not once. Not ever. They hadn't counted on one thing. I didn't move. My hands were flat on the pew in front of me. My eyes had already marked every exit in the building. The man in the second pew watched me do it. And something in his expression changed. 3 weeks later, I walked into a county family courtroom in Central Virginia. The room was small. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent overhead light. The kind that buzzes at a frequency most people stop hearing after 10 minutes. I never stop hearing it. Institutional carpet. Recirculated air that smelled like old paper, and the particular staleness of a building that processes other people's failures 5 days a week. Gallery seating for approximately 30. A judge's bench. 2 counsel tables. An American flag in the corner with a brass eagle on top that needed polishing. I arrived 11 minutes early. I paused at the threshold for 1 full second before crossing it. My eyes moved left, right, center. 2 exits. the main door behind me, and a side door near the judge's chambers. The main door opened outward. The side door had a push bar. The gallery railing was oak, solid, bolted to the floor. The ceiling tiles were standard drop panel, 9 feet. The windows were sealed. I took a seat in the gallery next to my attorney, Margaret Ellis. Back to the wall, clear view of the room's entrance. I placed both hands flat on the gallery railing in front of me. Margaret was reviewing her files. She did not look up. She did not need to. Margaret Ellis was a former Army JAG officer, captain retired, and she and I shared the shorthand of people who had both worn a uniform. When I sat down, she said, "We're ready," and turned a page. That was enough. Constance was already at the opposing counsel table with her attorney, William Graves. She was wearing a navy dress with a pearl brooch. Her hair was set. Her posture was composed. She looked like a woman who had come to do a difficult but necessary thing, the rescue of a grandchild from an unfit mother. She had dressed for the role. She had probably rehearsed in the mirror. She did not look at me. I did not need her to. Silence, I had learned, was the only cover story that never required maintenance. 8 minutes before proceedings began, a man entered through the main door behind me. I heard the hinge. I heard the weight of his step, measured, unhurried. The gait of someone who had spent years walking into rooms where the worst thing that could happen had already happened. He wore a dark coat. His Roman collar was visible at the neck. No medals, no uniform, no fanfare. He walked down the center aisle. He passed within 4 feet of me. He did not sit immediately. He stopped 1 seat away from where I was sitting with Margaret, and he stood there for a moment, facing the front of the courtroom. Then he turned his head and looked at me. He watched my hands on the gallery railing, flat, still, not folded, not fidgeting. He watched my eyes. I was scanning the room again. I hadn't noticed I was doing it. Left, right, center, exits. His gaze followed the scan. He recognized the sequence. I saw the recognition move through him like a current. Not surprise, not confusion, but confirmation, something he had been waiting 18 months to verify. He leaned down. His voice was quiet. The words were meant only for me. Paktia Province, October 2018. You quoted me the old translation. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. The courtroom clerk was sorting papers. Constance was whispering something to William Graves. None of them heard. I looked at him for 3 full seconds. His face was older than the one I remembered. The one I had seen upside down from a gurney under greenish institutional light, with a drainage tube in my chest and someone's hands on my collarbone. But the eyes were the same. Steady. Patient. The eyes of a man who had sat with the dying and the nearly dying, and had learned that presence was the only thing he could offer that never ran out. My grandmother taught it to me, I said, in Georgia. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Then he took his seat. 2 rows behind me on the aisle. That exchange took 11 seconds. Margaret Ellis heard all of it. She closed her file. She placed one hand flat on the table and exhaled. She had found him in my case file 3 weeks ago. The name of the chaplain at Bagrim's Roll 2, cross-referenced against active clergy assignments in Central Virginia. When she told me his name, I went quiet for a long time. The hearing began. Judge Warren Howard entered from chambers, mid-50s, gray at the temples, a face that had processed 1,000 custody disputes and could read a room before the first motion was filed. He sat. He adjusted his glasses. He asked for opening statements. William Graves went first. Constance's attorney. He was polished, mid-40s, silver cufflinks. He spoke with the cadence of a man who believed his own authority was self-evident. He outlined the petition. He described a mother, Constance, burdened by years of watching her daughter spiral, substance abuse, instability, and inability to provide consistent care. He referenced the 2 witness statements, Walsh and Hammond, and described them as credible community members with first-hand knowledge of Joanna Prescott's unfitness. He used the word pattern 4 times. He used the word concern 6 times. He used the word child 11 times. He did not use the word evidence once. Margaret's opening was 40 seconds long. She said the petition was based on fabricated testimony that the witnesses would recant or be impeached, and that the respondent, me, would provide military service records demonstrating that the factual basis of the petition was impossible. Judge Howard wrote something on his notepad. Then the testimony began. Rebecca Walsh was called first. She sat in the witness chair and held her purse on her lap, like it could protect her from what was coming. Margaret asked her 3 questions. The first: Mrs. Walsh, in your sworn statement, you indicated you observed Joanna Prescott intoxicated at a family gathering approximately 2 years ago. Can you tell me the date of that gathering? Rebecca looked at Constance. Constance did not look back. Rebecca said she didn't remember the exact date. Margaret produced a calendar. She produced my duty log from Fort Belvoir for the 6-month window around the claimed event. She produced post-access records showing I had not left the installation during that period. Rebecca Walsh's hands trembled. She said quietly, "Constance told me what to write." William Graves objected. Judge Howard sustained the objection on form, but the words were already in the room. They would not leave. Carol Hammond was next. She did not recant. She sat rigid in the chair and repeated her statement nearly word for word, as if reading from a script she had memorized. Margaret did not press her. She simply entered into evidence the same duty logs, the same post-access records, and a supplemental filing requesting the court refer Mrs. Hammond's testimony for review under Virginia's statute on fraudulent statements in custody proceedings. Judge Howard made another note. Then, it was my turn. I walked to the witness chair. I sat. I placed both hands flat on the table in front of me. Margaret asked me to state my name and occupation. I said, Joanna Prescott, Aviation Consulting, Contract Work. That was my cover. I held it because I had been holding it for 8 years, and because the habit of classified silence does not break in a courtroom. William Graves began his cross-examination. He leaned into it. He had prepared for a woman he believed was unstable, defensive, volatile. He expected me to crack. He started with the petition's language: instability, absence, lack of consistent parental presence. He asked why I had missed multiple family events. I said, work obligations. He asked what kind of work. I said, contract work, mostly logistics. He pressed harder. He referenced the Pactia crash, or what he knew of it, which was not much. He had obtained a fragment of my medical history through the petition process. Enough to know an aircraft had been involved. Enough to be dangerous with. He said, the record indicates your aircraft was destroyed in an uncontrolled crash in hostile territory. He let the word uncontrolled hang in the air. He was implying pilot error. He was implying recklessness. He was implying that a woman who crashes helicopters should not raise a child. My hands stayed flat on the table. I did not look at him when I answered. The aircraft sustained tail rotor authority failure from a direct RPG strike. Auto-rotation entry was initiated within 2 seconds of failure. Confined area approach protocol was executed into a dry riverbed with 0 obstacle clearance. All 4 passengers survived. The aircraft was not set down uncontrolled. It was set down. I paused. That is the record. William Graves stopped mid-reach for his notepad. His hand stayed suspended above the table for 2 full seconds. He had walked into that question expecting a woman who pushed papers. He had not expected someone who could describe a combat auto-rotation with the clinical precision of an aircraft accident report. He did not know what tail rotor authority failure meant. He did not know what confined area approach protocol was. He knew only that the woman sitting in front of him had said those words the way a surgeon names the tools on the tray. Without hesitation, without translation, without apology. He recovered. But the room had tilted. I could feel it. Judge Howard removed his glasses. He set them on the bench. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked at Margaret. Margaret stood. She said, Your Honor, the respondent calls a surprise witness, Father Thomas Whelan. William Graves objected immediately. We were not notified of this witness. Judge Howard looked at Margaret. Margaret said, Father Whelan is a fact witness with direct personal knowledge relevant to the factual basis of this petition. His testimony was not available at the time of initial filing. We are requesting the court's discretion under the interest of justice. Judge Howard considered this for 4 seconds. Then he said, I'll allow it. The man in the dark coat rose from the second row of the gallery. He walked down the center aisle with the same measured gait. He did not look at Constance as he passed her table. He did not acknowledge William Graves. He walked to the witness chair, and he sat. He folded his hands on the stand. He waited. Margaret said, "Please state your name and former occupation." Father Thomas Whelan. His voice was even, measured. The voice of a man who had delivered last rites and could calibrate tone the way a pilot calibrates altitude. Precisely because lives depended on it. Formerly Major Chaplain Corps, United States Army. 14 years of service, including deployment to Bagram Airfield, Parwan Province, Afghanistan 2017 through 2018. Constance's head turned, not slowly, sharply. The way you turn when a sound comes from a direction that should be empty. She had known this man for 18 months. He was her parish priest. He had sat in her pews. He had listened to her announcements. He had shaken her hand at the door after services. She had never once considered the possibility that he had been anywhere near the world she had spent 5 years erasing. Margaret continued. Father Whelan, can you describe the circumstances under which you first encountered the respondent, Joanna Prescott? Father Whelan did not look at his hands. He did not look at Constance. He looked at Judge Howard. I was present at Bagram Roll, 2 medical facility on the night of October 14, 2018. I was the on-call chaplain. A medevac flight brought in casualties from a personnel recovery operation in Paktia province. One of the casualties was a rotary wing aircraft commander, with a shattered collarbone, 3 fractured ribs, and a bone fragment pressing against her left lung. He paused. Not for drama, for accuracy. I held her hand through the surgical preparation. Her right hand, her left, was being assessed. She asked me to read Psalm 23. I read it. When I finished, she quoted the last verse back to me from memory. An older translation I had never heard anyone use in a hospital. I asked where she learned it. She said, "My grandmother, in Georgia." Another pause. Her call sign was Sabre 7 Actual. She was the aircraft commander. She had directed her crew's defensive perimeter for 90 minutes with broken bones and a fragment pressing against her lung. The room went completely still. Not quiet. Still. The fluorescent light kept buzzing overhead, indifferent as always. But everyone in it had stopped moving, as if the building itself had paused to decide what happened next. Father Whelan continued. She asked me to tell her crew they did right. She did not give me her rank. She did not say her name was on the manifest. She called herself the pilot. He paused once more. She was polite about it. Margaret asked, Father Whelan, how are you certain that the woman you treated at Bagram is the same woman sitting in this courtroom? Father Whelan looked at me for the first time since taking the stand. His eyes were steady, the same steadiness I had seen through the greenish light of a surgical bay 6 years ago. She quoted me a verse in a hospital 6 years ago. I have never heard anyone use that translation since. He turned back to Judge Howard. I was assigned to Mrs. Prescott's parish 18 months ago. I heard Constance Prescott describe her daughter to the congregation on my second Sunday. The woman she described was not the woman I held hands with at Bagram. I have been listening since. Margaret. And during the period Mrs. Prescott has described as substance abuse and homelessness, October through December 2018, where was Captain Prescott? She was at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, recovering from the injuries I have just described. I know this because I was the chaplain who initiated her transfer paperwork from Bagram to Walter Reed. Her name, her rank, and her call sign are on the field communication log from that night. He reached into his coat pocket. He produced a single piece of paper, a photocopy worn at the folds. He held it out. Margaret took it and entered it into evidence. Father Whelan said, I made that copy the week after she was transferred. I thought someday someone might need to know what I witnessed. Judge Howard accepted the document. He looked at it. Joanna's call sign was on it. Her blood type, her injury assessment, the time she was admitted, the time she entered surgery. Every entry time stamped. The contrast was not abstract. It was dated. The same months Constance had been standing at that microphone, telling 80 people her daughter was homeless, addicted, lost. Joanna Prescott was lying in a military hospital with a drainage tube in her chest and a dead crew member's last words in her memory. Judge Howard set the document down. He looked at Constance. Constance's handkerchief had slipped from her hand to the floor. She did not pick it up. Her composure, that practiced parish elder composure, she had worn like vestments for 5 years, had cracked along a seam she did not know she had. Her mouth opened. It closed. Her attorney placed a hand on her arm. She did not seem to feel it. William Graves stared at the document in the judge's hand. He did not object. He did not speak. He had walked into this courtroom to prosecute a substance-abusing dropout, and the woman at the other table had just been identified under oath by a priest, by a major, as a combat-decorated aircraft commander who had saved 4 lives in a war zone while the petitioner was filing fabricated documents from a church office he knew. The room knew. The architecture had failed. The load-bearing walls Constance had spent 5 years constructing, Sunday by Sunday, handshake by handshake. He encountered a single piece of paper with a time-stamp, and a man in a Roman collar who remembered what he held in that hospital. Father Whelan sat in the witness chair with his hands folded. He did not editorialize. He did not embellish. He had said what he saw. He had produced what he kept. That was all. Margaret looked at me. I looked at her. Something passed between us that did not require words. The short hand of 2 women who had worn the uniform. Judge Howard removed his glasses again. He set them on the bench. He looked at the courtroom. He said, "I'd like a 15-minute recess." The room exhaled. I placed both hands flat on the table in front of me. I adjusted my watch, inside the left wrist where I always wore it, the way they trained me at Rucker. The silver face caught the fluorescent light for 1 second. I did not look at Constance, not because I couldn't, because I already knew what I would see. And it was no longer my problem to carry. Margaret Ellis leaned over during the recess and said 2 words. "We're done." She meant the petition. She meant the legal scaffolding Constance had spent 3 weeks constructing and 5 years rehearsing. She meant the witness statements, the filing, the county process that had kept me awake at 2 in the morning, reading custody language while my daughter slept 12 feet away. She was right. When Judge Howard returned, he did not sit immediately. He stood behind the bench for a moment, holding the photocopy Father Whelan had produced. The field communication log from Bagram's Roll 2, dated October 14, 2018. Call sign, blood type, injury assessment, admission time, surgical time, every entry stamped, every stamp legible, 6 years old and still steady in the ink. He sat. He put on his glasses. He looked at William Graves, counselor. "I've reviewed the documentary evidence entered by the Respondents' Council and the testimony of Father Whelan. I've also reviewed the duty logs and post-access records entered in impeachment of the Walsh and Hammond statements." He paused. "The factual basis of this petition is not merely insufficient. It is contradicted by time-stamped federal records. The witness statements supporting this petition describe events that did not occur during periods when the respondent was verifiably on a military installation." He turned to Constance. "Mrs. Prescott, the petition for parental fitness review is dismissed with prejudice." Constance did not move. Furthermore, Judge Howard continued, "This court is referring the matter of the Walsh and Hammond affidavits to the county prosecutor's office for review under Virginia Code Section 18.2-434. The filing of fraudulent statements in a legal proceeding. Mrs. Hammond's continued maintenance of her statement under oath compounds the court's concern." He sat down the document. He removed his glasses again and held them in one hand. "Captain Prescott." The word landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. He had not called me that before. No one in that courtroom had. He had read it on the communication log. He had read Father Whelan's testimony. And he chose to use it now in front of everyone, including my mother. "Captain Prescott, the custody of your daughter is not and has never been in legal jeopardy from this petition. The record is clear. This matter is closed." I said, "Thank you, Your Honor." 3 words. My hands stayed flat on the table. The hearing ended. People stood. The clerk gathered papers. William Graves collected his files without looking at Constance. Father Whelan rose from the witness chair and walked back to the gallery. As he passed my seat, he paused for 1 second. He did not speak. He placed his hand on the gallery railing near mine, not touching, just close. The gesture of a man who had held a stranger's hand in a hospital and understood that some debts are settled in silence. Then he walked out of the courtroom. The hallway outside the courtroom had the same institutional carpet, the same recirculated air. Margaret was beside me. Her case file closed under her arm. We were walking toward the exit when I heard the footsteps behind us. Constance. Her heels on the tile. Faster than her usual pace. The sound of a woman who had never had to chase anyone, and did not know how to do it gracefully. "Joanna." I stopped. Margaret stopped beside me. She did not intervene. She knew this part was mine. You never told me what you were. I turned. My mother was standing 6 feet away. The pearl brooch was still pinned to her navy dress. Her handkerchief was gone, left on the courtroom floor, I assumed, where she had dropped it. Her eyes were wet, not from grief, from exposure. The look of a woman who had been standing behind a wall for 5 years and someone had just removed it. I didn't. I thought. She never said where she was. Her voice broke. She did not finish the sentence. No one in the hallway moved to help her. I looked at her for a long moment. I did not raise my voice. I adjusted my watch. You built that story while I was in a hospital. You put my daughter's custody into question to protect something you invented. I stopped. I couldn't explain where I was. I couldn't call you from the room I was in. I couldn't bring you into that world. You knew that. And you used it. Constance opened her mouth. You didn't ask, I said. Not once in 13 years. I said it the way I read back a clearance. Accurate, confirmed, closed. I'm not asking for anything from you. I stopped doing that. I turned and walked out of the courthouse with Margaret Ellis. The door was heavy. It opened outward. The air outside was cold and dry and tasted like November coming early. I did not look back. The thing about the truth is that it doesn't need to be loud. It only needs one good witness. The weeks that followed were not dramatic. They were procedural. That is how collapse works in the real world. Not in a single moment, but in a series of documents filed and phone calls not returned, and doors that close one at a time until the person on the other side realizes they are standing in an empty room. William Graves withdrew from Constance's representation within 7 days. His office sent a 1-paragraph letter citing irreconcilable differences in case strategy. What it meant was that he had staked his professional credibility on a petition built from fabricated affidavits, and he needed distance before the prosecutor's review reached his name. Rebecca Walsh's recantation was entered into the formal court record. Constance told me what to write. That sentence, 7 words long, became the foundation of the fraud referral. Rebecca cooperated fully. She provided the original email Constance had sent her with the language for the affidavit, pre-written, formatted, ready to sign. Rebecca had not fully understood the legal weight of what she was putting her name to. She understood it now. Carol Hammond did not cooperate. She maintained her statement through the initial prosecutor's interview. She maintained it through the follow-up. She maintained it the way a person maintains a lie they have confused with loyalty, rigidly without variation, as if consistency were the same thing as truth. The legal fees alone would outlast whatever friendship Constance had offered her. Within the congregation, the collapse was slower but just as thorough. Father Whelan did not preach on it. He did not editorialize from the pulpit. He did not need to. The testimony was a matter of public record. Court proceedings in Virginia are not sealed by default. Someone in the gallery, one of the 30 people who had watched a parish priest identify a combat-decorated army captain, as the woman their church elder had called a drug-addicted failure, told someone. Who told someone? Who told everyone? The version that circulated was not exaggerated. It did not need to be. The facts were enough. A helicopter pilot with a shattered collarbone. A dead crew member. A mother filing false custody documents from a church office while her daughter was at Walter Reed. The facts did the work that 5 years of architecture could not withstand. Constance resigned her position as parish administrative secretary 3 weeks after the hearing. The official reason was personal health needs. No one in the congregation asked for clarification. No one organized a prayer circle. No one reached for her hand after the service and said, "You're so strong, Constance." The infrastructure she had built, the sympathy, the admiration, the careful performance of maternal suffering, had been load-tested against a single time-stamp document and a man in a Roman collar. And it had failed. She was not arrested. The fraud referral was a misdemeanor filing with potential civil liability. It would move through the system at the speed systems move. I did not follow its progress. I did not need to. The petition was dismissed with prejudice. Hannah was with me. The rest was paperwork someone else would handle. It wasn't vindication. It wasn't triumph. It was simply the record, corrected, in a room where the truth had always been waiting to be read aloud. I drove south on Route 1 toward Fort Belvoir. Late afternoon. The light was going amber gray. That particular quality Virginia gets in late October when the sun drops early and everything turns the color of old brass. Traffic was steady. The government vehicle was clean. It always was. Habit. I pulled into a rest stop 22 minutes north of Post. A concrete turnout with a trash can and a bench nobody was using. I put the car in park. I sat for a moment with both hands on the wheel. My left shoulder ached. It always did in the cold. The dull structural pain that nobody sees and I never mention. The scar runs 5 inches from my left clavicle toward my shoulder blade. Every piece of clothing I own covers it. I sleep on my right side exclusively. These are the terms of the arrangement I made with a dry riverbed in Pakti province 6 years ago. I have never renegotiated. I opened the glove compartment. There is a folded piece of cardboard inside. Not an envelope. Not a folder. A piece of cardboard cut from an MRE box worn at the folds kept in a Ziploc bag for moisture protection. I took it out. I unfolded it carefully. The handwriting is unsteady. My right hand was managing most of it. My left shoulder was still compromised. The letters are larger than my normal hand, slightly irregular, as if I was pressing hard to make sure the ink took. Dear Mrs. Teague, my name is Joanna Prescott. I was Danny's aircraft commander. I want to tell you something true about your son. I read all of it. I have it memorized. I read it anyway. Danny Teague was 21 years old. He had a gap between his front teeth and a habit of humming country songs during pre-flight checks. He died on a medevac flight in my aircraft. His last words were, "Tell my mom it wasn't scary." I wrote this letter on a piece of MRE cardboard because my arm could not hold a pen steady enough for paper. I have kept the carbon copy for 6 years in a Ziploc bag in the glove compartment of whatever vehicle I was assigned. It has traveled with me from Walter Reed to Fort Belvoir to 3 temporary duty stations. It will travel with me until I stop. I refolded it. I slid it back into the Ziploc. I closed the glove compartment. I sat in the silence for 1 more minute. The amber light came through the windshield and settled on my hands, still on the wheel. I thought about Hannah. I thought about Saturday morning. I thought about pancakes. I thought about an 8-year-old girl who would never have to ask where I am. The promotion board for major is sitting. I know this. I do not talk about it. The Walter Reed recovery window and the limited duty assignment created a gap in my evaluation reports that cost me 1 selection cycle. I was passed over once. I am in the zone again. Whatever happens with that will happen on its own timeline. I have learned that some things move at the speed they move and pushing does not help. I pulled out of the rest stop. Fort Belvoir was 22 minutes away. My name was on the scheduling board in the squadron ready room. I was back on the flight roster tomorrow at 0530. The professional world, the only world that has always known exactly who I am, was waiting. The amber light on the highway looked like rotor wash in a dry riverbed. I did not slow down. There is a carbon copy of a letter that still shakes in the handwriting, and a scheduling board that still has my name on it, and a daughter who will never have to ask where I am. That is enough. That has always been enough. I work at a post in Virginia now. No announcements, no church bulletins. Just Joanna. If you enjoyed this story about quiet competence winning over loud arrogance, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe daily Reddit readings for more stories just like this one.